Hello, and welcome to Ask the History Buff, the podcast that informs and educates about Canada's Christian history. We hope that you will be inspired to research Canadian history because you heard it on Ask the History Buff. Each week, we will explore the lives of influencers, the events which they influenced, and the legacy they left behind. Today, Canadians walk either in the light of those legacies or in the darkness of those legacies. I am Lynette, a transplanted Canadian from the West Indies. I am not a degreed historian by any stretch of the imagination, but what I have is curiosity and research. I have researched more of our Canadian history than most Canadians that I know. I'm always discovering new and interesting information about Canadian history, and that excites me. So I call myself the curious Canadian history buff. My hope is that you would be encouraged to Google people's names that you hear on Ask the History Buff. Google the events surrounding them, like I do, so that you can understand their impact on our society. And if you Google those names, I want to further encourage you to follow the rabbit trails. What I mean by that is that you should click on events and click on links and click on people, search the people associated with them so you get a fuller, bigger picture of who they really were. And if you're a Christian, my encouragement to you is to be a Berean. And that simply means that you check the facts. I want people to fact check me. And that is a biblical principle. You search out everything that you hear, and that biblical principle comes from Acts 10, chapter 17. So go check it out. But then, if you're too busy to search and you found something that you want to know more about, then ask the history buff. I may have the answers, and if I don't, I will look up the answers for you and get back to you. So send your questions in. Feel free to challenge my information anytime. Send your questions to info@christianrootscanada.org. And if you find something new, you may teach me something that I didn't know before. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to like and share this podcast at christianrootscanada.podbean, that's podbean.com. Well, for the month of August, we've been doing a series about Christians who left huge, indelible legacies in Ontario. These legacies cannot be erased by the cancel culture. The first Monday of August, every year, some of these Christian personalities are celebrated in various cities. We are unearthing some of their legacies. In past episodes, we dealt with Simcoe. 2 episodes of Simcoe, an episode of Joseph Brant and John By. There is a lot to learn about Alexander Mackenzie, who was the first Prime Minister of the second Prime Minister of Canada. So, for 2024, we would tell you about Alexander Mackenzie in 2 episodes. So this is the legacy of Prime Minister Alexander Mackenzie. He was the first liberal prime minister, and you can compare him with our current prime minister. And once upon a time, the Liberal Party was a Christian party. The leaders were Christian. Shh, don't tell Justin Trudeau. He might want to disown them. Alexander Mackenzie was Canada's second prime minister and the first Liberal prime minister to lead Canada into nationhood 6 years after its birth as a dominion. He became prime minister after Johnny MacDonald fell from grace by accepting bribes in the pursuit of building the Canadian Pacific Railway to link British Columbia to the rest of Canada. Now, British Columbia was also one of Britain's colonies, but because they were on the west end of the country, they agreed to join Confederation if the intercolonial railway, which already linked the other provinces, was extended out to BC so that they could be connected, basically from sea to sea. But before we go further, who really was Alexander Mackenzie? Well, he was born in Perthshire, Scotland in 1822, and he died in Toronto in 1892 when he was 70 years old. Alexander Mackenzie was a Christian of the Presbyterian denomination. He switched his allegiance to the Baptist Church after marrying his wife, who was a Baptist. He was the third of 7 boys, and his father died when he was 13 years old. That same year, he began full-time employment. He was apprenticed as a stonemason at 16, and he began work as a journeyman in less than 4 years after that. So let's talk about his character and his reputation. As an adult, he was a stonemason, a businessman, a militia officer, a journalist, a politician, and an author. He arrived in Canada as a 20-year-old stonemason in 1842, and in his words, with scarce 16 shillings in my pocket. His ability to learn new skills quickly and his firm, direct way of handling workers rapidly enhanced his reputation. He found that his tools, his stonemason tools, were inadequate for the hard limestone in Kingston, where he first settled. He therefore pivoted to building construction and contracting, which landed him a prestigious contract to build a bomb-proof arch at Fort Henry. The story is told about him that he visited Fort Henry when he was prime minister, and he asked a soldier escorting him around, "Soldier, how thick are these walls?" To which the soldier replied that he did not know. Well, Alexander Mackenzie said, "I do. It is 5 feet 10 inches. I know because I built it myself." So what a guy, prime minister, boasting about his stonemason days. Mackenzie's biblical beliefs and standards shaped his life and his attitude. And though Those things, his beliefs, gave him strength and comfort and sustained him in all the vicissitudes and challenges of life. He was honest and frank to a fault, it is said. While he lived in Kingston, he was very vocal against what he saw as the attitude of entitlement and corruption which existed both in religious and governmental circles. His integrity and reputation grew so that he was known to be hardworking, honest, and financially responsible. He left a lasting legacy in Kingston in the form of four round stone towers, which acted as smaller fortifications to protect the colony from possible enemy attacks coming from Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence Seaway. These four towers are called the Martello Towers, and they line the shores of Lake Ontario in the Kingston area. You should visit them. Quite an interesting experience. He was a foreman in the construction of the Welland Canal and the Beauharnois Canal. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly because it's French, in the St. Lawrence Seaway in Quebec. While working at the Beauharnois Canal, unfortunately, a 1-ton rock crushed his leg, and even though he recovered, his leg was never the same. He moved to Sarnia in 1847, where he established a successful construction company, which allowed him to assist the rest of the family in Scotland to immigrate to Canada. Many factors contributed to the strong commitment he always had to his family's well being. Some of these factors included his religious upbringing, his biblical convictions, his family's misfortune, and his early introduction to the world of work. These shared experiences made his family very important to him. In Sarnia, his humble beginnings, his biblical worldview, and his faith in God was visible to the public. He was involved in the influential temperance movement and believed in democratic principles. Alexander Mackenzie left visible, lasting legacies across southern Ontario through his construction company. These included the Episcopal Church and the Episcopal Church and the Bank of Upper Canada in Sarnia, the jail in Chatham, and the courthouse in Windsor. He was also known as a construction developer and building materials supplier. In 1859, his company was outbid by J.R. Booth for the construction of the Parliament buildings. So here's a little bit about him getting into politics and how it all happened. Before Confederation, politics in the province of Canada was very fractious. This harked back to the Upper and Lower Canada rebellions of 1837-1838. Those two events, and you should look them up and read them, please. Very, very interesting history. Those two events resulted in the British government recombining the two colonies of Upper and Lower Canada into the province of Canada in 1841. The separate parliaments of Upper and Lower Canada were abolished and replaced by a single parliament with two houses, the Legislative Council as the upper chamber and the Legislative Assembly as the lower chamber. From 1841 to 1848, the joint governments fell 5 times until there was a measure of stability under the leadership of Louis Hippolyte Lafontaine from Canada East, which is Quebec, and Robert Baldwin from Canada West or Ontario, until an unpopular bill was passed to implement compensation for rebellion losses to Lower Canada. This resulted in the burning down of the Parliament buildings in Montreal in 1849 by the Anglophones living in Montreal. From 1851, Alexander Mackenzie made his foray into politics when he became the secretary of the Reform Party for Lambton County. The Reform Party was the forerunner of the Liberal Party. There, as secretary, he convinced George Brown, owner of the Globe newspaper, which is now the Globe and Mail, and it was considered a reformist paper. So he convinced George Brown to successfully run in elections for the Kent Lambton seat in the Legislative Assembly. He campaigned hard for George Brown, thus sealing a lifetime friendship. By 1852, he became the editor of a local newspaper, a reformist newspaper called the Lambton Shield. It folded when a libel case was brought against him by a conservative candidate. When the key witness claimed cabinet confidence, he lost the case and was put into financial hardship, resulting in the folding of the newspaper. In the 1860s, representatives in the Legislative Assembly from Upper Canada, Canada West, comprised two factions. The Reformers, also called the Clear Grits or the Liberals, led by George Brown and Alexander Mackenzie, and the Liberal Conservatives, led by Johnny MacDonald. The representatives in the Legislative Assembly from Lower Canada, Canada East, was led by Georges Etienne Cartier. The Reformers, which became the Liberal Party, was founded largely by Christians like Mackenzie, Alexander Mackenzie, and George Brown. George Brown was the leader. And they decried political corruption by the Liberal Conservative Party of the province of Canada, and they wanted to see political reform. In 1861, Alexander Mackenzie encouraged his brother Hope to run for a seat in the Legislative Assembly, but Hope declined. Alexander was then encouraged to run himself so he could join and support his friend George Brown in the assembly. He was successful in gaining the first seat in the Legislative Assembly in 1862 at the age of 40. In 1864, an event called the Great Coalition took place. Read about that again. Canada East or Quebec and Canada West or Ontario decided to approach the other colonies, which is Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI, to work together to form a confederation of the colonies. A new political entity was needed to negotiate with the other colonies to work out the terms of reference for uniting as one nation. George Brown resigned from the council over the issue of reciprocity negotiations with the United States. Mackenzie replaced George Brown at that time. Now, I want to just a little aside here. The whole issue of reciprocity with the United States has been going on way before Confederation, way before the colonies became a confederated dominion. After Confederation, Alexander Mackenzie was elected to the House of Commons to represent Lambton County in Sarnia, where he was located. George Brown did not win a seat in the first elections, and there was not a cohesive Liberal Party operating as yet. Since no leader emerged in the House of Commons, a few months before the MacDonald government fell because of the Pacific Rail scandal, Alexander Mackenzie was chosen as the Liberal Party leader. So in 1873, that's how he became the first Liberal Prime Minister when Sir John A. Macdonald of the Conservative Party had resigned. Macdonald, like I said before, was exposed for accepting bribes from the railway magnate Hugh Allen via a donation to the Conservative Party. That was because BC had agreed to join Confederation on the condition that the existing intercolonial railway would be extended out to BC to link them with the entire country, so they could have trading access also with the rest of Canada. When the bribe was discovered, the government of Sir John A. Macdonald fell. The Governor General, Lord Dufferin, asked Alexander Mackenzie to form the government. He agreed, and he asked the Governor General to call an election in 1874. The Liberals were endorsed by the population when they won a landslide victory with 40% of the popular votes. At first blush, Lord Dufferin had his reservations and misgivings with the thought that a mere stonemason is taking over the government. However, his opinions changed upon actually meeting this fine, upright, honest man. He actually said, "However narrow and inexperienced Mackenzie may be, I imagine he is a thoroughly upright, well-principled, and well-meaning man." So there you go. There is so much more to the lasting legacy Alexander Mackenzie left behind. In 2024, we live in the shade of the governmental foundations and seeds of democracy that Alexander Mackenzie planted. In the next episode, which will be the last one for 2024, about these men who are celebrated in various cities of various cities of Ontario, I'm sorry. And these men who are celebrated, so I will continue this in August next year. And so, but in the next episode, we will examine the political legacies left behind by the man referred to in his first biography in 1892 as Canada's stainless statesman, and the worldwide tributes that poured in because of his character and his integrity. So remember to spot the influencers and the events that they influenced and ask yourself, what was the legacy? And how is that legacy or event or issue affecting us in 2024? So I'll see you in the next podcast. Bye for now. Have you ever wondered why Quebec is so different from the rest of Canada? Why is there a French presence in Canada? And where did they come from? If you have not delved into our history from France, I almost guarantee you that you didn't know that Canada was first colonized by persecuted Huguenots, the French Protestants. At first, a small group of them were given fur trading monopolies by King Henry IV. Then others came after Henry IV died. They fled from Cardinal Richelieu and his brutal French Catholic regime. And why did that happen? Let me introduce you to the French Connection. The French Connection is a story-based video history course linking our history to the marble frieze mounted over the left doorway of the House of Commons. It shows Francis I on the left and Louis XIV on the right. These kings also bookend stories of the persecution of the Huguenots, which started under Francis I and continued until Louis XIV, except for under Henry IV. The course covers 200 years of history, uncovering the stories of the Huguenots who established the first colonies in the Atlantic provinces, Quebec, and Ontario. This program is the first of its kind. It's chronological, explicitly biblical, with video-based stories for all of the family. It traces God's providence in bringing different people together to write His story. In September 2024, we will be introducing our new additions to the course, the new student workbook and the new answer key. The workbook contains questions, quizzes, projects, essays, extra readings, supplemental videos, a final test, and so much more. You will also get 6 modules, which breaks down into 26 video stories and lesson outlines, as well as an audio version and an ebook. There are also maps and charts and timelines and photos and other extra student-only resources. So here's the steal of the deal. Compared to other Canadian history courses, you get 26 video lessons, the audio version, so you can re-listen to the content anywhere, anytime, an ebook, the new student workbook, the new answer sheet, and for homeschooled high schoolers, the equivalence of 1 Canadian history credit. Here's an extra bonus. You don't have to purchase annual licenses for each student in the same household. It's a one-time purchase deal. You have permanent access for use by all students in the same household. And here's a great deal for you. Until September 6th, all listeners get a 10% off coupon because you listen to Ask the History Buff. Just use the code HistoryBuff at checkout to get the entire course for only $270. I call that a steal of a deal.